Today's episode of Overdue Finds is brought to you by EPL's Spring Break Starts Here program. From March 21st until March 29th, EPL offers free activities and events to encourage kids to play, create, and explore. This year, there are more exciting guest performances to choose from, including bubbles, balloon art, yoga, circus fun, magic, and even live butterflies. There's even select classes in French. Visit epl.ca/springbreak for the full schedule. Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Caroline, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Bryce?
Excellent. Second episode here, recording in the currently being revitalized Stanley A. Milner Library.
Yes.
Each day, each week, there seems to be more and more completed as we inch closer to getting into that new recording studio.
Absolutely. It's very exciting. There's a buzz in the building.
There really is. And it's not just the fluorescent lights.
You might be able to hear that buzz.
You might be able to hear that. So today I'm really excited because, of course, the last episode that that was released, we were talking all about the March Madness tournament.
Yes.
And one of the things that I was a little disappointed with when we were kind of creating the bracket was I really wanted to incorporate video games in there somehow. And of course, if you look at the March Madness bracket, there's only 4 categories. We would have had to cut something. It would seem odd for a library podcast to maybe eliminate books.
Yeah.
So we were like, you know what? Let's dedicate maybe our next episode of Overdue Finds to kind of the top video games of the 2010s, right?
Absolutely, because we did get a number of suggestions from staff at EPL about what their favorite games were, and we know that it's really a popular topic, and we just wanted to have the opportunity to celebrate video games.
Exactly, and we've got a couple of guests joining us today who both sent us suggestions for what never was the...
Yeah, what would have been.
Yes, what would have been the video games
bracket
in the March Madness tournament. So we want to welcome today, we've got a couple first-time guests. I want to welcome my colleague in marketing, web content administrator, Sam Hamilton. Sam, welcome to Overdue Finds.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I know I was really excited to have you on because I think it was maybe even, a few months ago, you sent me a note and you were like, if you're ever doing another video games episode, I want to be on.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So yeah, you're a big gamer, so I know you're going to fill us in today on some of your picks and what you felt were kind of the best games of the last decade. Before we get started though, tell I guess our listeners a little bit about your role here at EPL, because you kind of have a little bit of a non-traditional library role. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about it?
Sure, yeah. I'm a librarian at EPL, but I manage the website and I provide digital literacy and tech support to staff.
Absolutely. So we recently revamped the website. Sam kind of helped lead that charge, and she does awesome work with us. So welcome to the show. And also joining us, we've brought this gentleman's name up a couple times on the podcast because he's given us great suggestions, including a great story in our kind of funny staff stories episode. Welcome to the podcast, Mike Eaton. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
So you work at our Clairview location.
I do.
And tell us a little bit about the Clairview branch.
Clairview branch. Clairview opened at the end of 2014. It's part of the Clairview Rec Center, which is up in the northeast corner of the city. This week we've just been having CBC. They've been doing pop-up broadcasting from the Rec Center all week, and so we've had them. Mark Connolly did our family story time the other day. Last night was our book club, and we had a Canada Reads discussion there.
Yeah, it looked like
Great.
It looked like a great turnout for that. Welcome to the show. We're going to have a great time today talking about gaming. But before we get started, let's talk about some of our own recent overdue finds. Sam, let's start with you. What have you been enjoying lately?
I'm currently reading the Expanse book series by James S.A. Corey. I'm on book 2 right now, Caliban's War. It's a sci-fi adventure with like realistic science. That there's effects on gravity. There's creepy science experiments. It's really fun.
Creepy science experiments. That does sound fun. So is it a YA series?
No, it's an adult series, but it's perfectly fine for teens. There's not a whole lot of graphic stuff in it.
Nice.
Might be some crossover appeal.
Yeah, just from our experience with doing the podcast, I find kind of book descriptions like that tend to fall into more of the YA category. But because I YA is very popular with staff.
Absolutely.
All right, Mike, what have you been enjoying lately? I see you brought a book with you.
Yeah, perfect for podcasting.
Yeah.
Have a look. No, I've been reading this new book. It was actually recommended to me by a colleague who is also I'm into running, and she is as well. So she just recommended this book, and I've been getting into it. It's called The Incomplete Book of Running. It's by Peter Sagal, who's a NPR host, and basically just it's sort of a memoir where he talks about how his interest in running has sort of gone up and down over the years, and how it's paralleled with events in his life. And there's just it's very interesting so far. And without giving away too much of myself, there's a lot of interesting parallels there. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
The first time I really came across a running memoir, or more accurately, someone who was recommending a running memoir, I remember getting really kind of thrown by the topic, and I don't know why, because I read a bunch of books about things that are not, the art of writing a book, but I don't know what it was about the idea of like reading about running that I found a little unusual, but there are some really great ones out there, I've heard.
It's a really interesting hobby because it is a solitary thing, and it's something. I think it's one of those things that people aren't meh about running. You either love it and it's all you do, all you want to do, or it's just nope. So I think that it creates a strong reaction in people, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Like passion definitely makes for interesting stories.
Yeah, I have so much respect for people who run and compete in marathons. I am terrible at that stuff. Even going on the treadmill, to me, it just seems like such a chore. So, people like yourself, Mike, who go out there and are great at running and are enthusiastic about it.
I never said I was great at
running. I wish I was. I'd be in much better shape. Caroline, how about you? What have you been enjoying lately?
Well, my pick this week is a new item to our catalog, so I think there's a few holds on it, but get on the holds list because it's worth it. It's the movie Knives Out, which came out in theaters at the end of last year. I saw it the week after we did our best of 2019 recording, so we only touched briefly on it. If I had seen it, I probably would have gushed more about it. I really love it. It's a murder mystery set in an old Connecticut mansion where a mystery writer has been found dead. The police are investigating his extended family, his kids, his grandkids. They're all together. There's his nurse, there's the housing staff, there's just all of these personalities in play. The cast is amazing in it. Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc, the investigator, just creates this amazing character that you follow throughout the movie. Other actors in it, Toni Collette is so funny. Don Johnson has like a really interesting turn in it. Jamie Lee Curtis, Chris Evans. It's just such a good movie.
Yeah, I can't say enough great things about that movie too. I saw it before our Best of 2019 episode that we recorded. It was very close to me. I went with the Joker, but I've since seen Parasite, so that kind of bumped the Joker out for me. But Knives Out, I can't say enough great things about myself. I did hear that they are going to be doing a sequel, though, to kind of further the adventures of Benoit Blanc. Yeah. And I think they're similar to Knives Out. They're going to be trying to get another all-star kind of cast for the whodunit.
Yeah, and it's just so cleverly written. Ryan Johnson was nominated for an Academy Award for the screenplay. His movies are always interesting. Whether or not you like them, there's definitely something that he's putting out there with his movies, and I'm really excited. Sometimes I get a little nervous about sequels or things. Is it going to live up to it? But I think they with something like a new cast bringing new energy in, I want to see more.
Mm-hmm. It also looked to me like that would have been a really fun movie to be on the set of. It just seemed everybody was having a blast with the material.
Ryan Johnson's a really interesting director because he works within sort of well-worn genres like murder mysteries and like something like Looper, which was an action movie, but he has this really great ability to turn it into something new and fresh.
Yeah, or Brick, which was more of like a noir style, but reinvented with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. So, yeah.
Or Star Wars, another one there.
Oh, yeah.
Where I'm just going to be controversial and say The Last Jedi was amazing. So
I should not say anything because I don't know enough to really wade in on it. But I was really happy for him that he was having this success with Knives Out at the time that the most recent Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, was coming out, and I like it when people succeed, so that was really great. Bryce, what have you been enjoying?
All right, so for me, I recently watched a documentary called Tough Guy, the Bob Probert story. So for those hockey fans out there like myself, the documentary takes a look at the life of NHL enforcer Bob Probert. The enforcer kind of part of the NHL really, thankfully, has kind of gone the way of the dodo, if you will. There's basically in kind of the 80s, 90s, even the 70s, really teams would carry kind of like this tough guy on the team. He might only see a few minutes on the ice per game and would just go out there if, somebody looked at the superstar players the wrong way. But Bob Probert was a little bit different, though, because he was kind of the most feared enforcer in the NHL. But at the same time, there were seasons where he put up like 50, 60 points. And he in one season was actually an NHL All-Star. The documentary is great. It covers his childhood, and he kind of had a little bit of a strict upbringing. And he lost a close member of his family, which may have kind of started his life down the wrong path just as he was kind of hitting the NHL. Of course, anybody who knows his story, there was drug possession, driving under the influence. He really did live a full life. So if you're interested, if you're a hockey fan, I can't recommend it enough. And even if you're not a hockey fan, go out and check out this documentary. There's also a book by the same name, Tough Guy, the Bob Probert story. And I believe it's actually, the documentary is kind of produced by the people who helped write his book as well. So NHL playoffs are coming up, and if you're really talky, check that one out. All right. So as we teased at the beginning of the episode, we actually did talk about video games on one of our very early episodes of the podcast with Holly Arneson, but it's something we really haven't talked about in a while. Of course, we talked about how we really try to include games in our March Madness tournament, but there wasn't a great way to kind of fit them in. So today we're, of course, going to be talking about some of our favorite games from the past 10 years. Mike, I'm going to start with you. What was the first system that you remember playing, and were there any games growing up that you kind of really hooked you, and you were like, I love video games. This is what I'm going to be playing for the rest of my life.
Well, we're going to go in the way back time machine. I've been playing video games since literally the 70s. I'm an old guy, in case it doesn't come through on there. My first system was a ColecoVision back in, I guess it would have been about 1980 or something like that. My cousin had an Atari 2600, and I ended up getting it later, just because they were giving it away or something. So I got to play that sort of after the fact. But my first system was ColecoVision, and my games... I think probably the first game we owned, the pack-in game with it was Donkey Kong. So I played that backwards and forwards and everything. Zaxxon was a pretty cool one that I played. That one had 3D kind of isometric graphics, which was pretty slick for that period of time. For games that really hooked me growing up, oh my goodness, probably some of those NES games, or early Nintendo games like Castlevania was something that really got its hooks in me. Ninja Gaiden, Contra, any of those side-scrolling action games, that was completely my jam growing up.
Same thing. One of my first systems that I remember playing, my parents had an Intellivision. So for those of you not familiar with Intellivision, it's kind of like the Sega to Atari, if they represent Nintendo in the 80s. Like it wasn't, I think that might make sense to some listeners, I think.
I was just wondering if you were mispronouncing television.
No, I was not.
Okay, good.
My aunt and uncle had an Intellivision, and it had a really interesting controller.
Yeah, it looked kind of like a phone pad. So there was like 1 through 9, and you'd have to put this plastic cover on the controller. And for certain games, like you would see, like you'd have to hit 6 to like shoot your gun, or maybe 3 to do something else. It's a weird setup
because it would slide over like an overlay.
Yeah,
and then that would be how you would control. Because then there was like a little disc controller or something.
Yeah, kind of at the bottom.
It was a weird system.
Yeah, Caroline just looks totally confused.
Yeah.
When we're done, you have to Google Intellivision.
I absolutely will be, because this sounds wild.
Yeah. Sam, how about you? Was there like a system? You're quite a bit younger than me, so I'm curious to see what kind of you first started playing.
Yeah, because I'm not familiar with any of the systems you're talking about. My first system was the original NES or Nintendo. My parents had it before they had kids, so it was already in the house available for me and my brother to play. I played a lot of games on it, but what really hooked me growing up was Pokemon Yellow for the Game Boy Color.
Oh, yeah.
I was the prime target age for Pokemon coming out, so that really hooked me, and I'm still into Pokemon now.
Well, I was going to say, today, obviously, this being a podcast, you can't see what Sam's wearing, but she has a really cool Pokemon/Zelda t-shirt that you wore for the podcast today.
Mm-hmm. Representing my 2 favorite games.
We should have more guests who wear theme outfits.
You really should.
To record. So this is a challenge to any future Overdue Finds guests. The gauntlet has been thrown down.
That's right. Dress up for your recording with us.
Yeah, and then as a teenager, I was really into The Sims for PC. Building houses, finding creative, clever ways to kill off my Sims. Yeah, a lot of fun. So yeah, those games really got me into gaming.
Nice. Yeah, I remember I was kind of a little bit too old to get into Pokemon, but I remember when it came out with the Game Boy Color, and as somebody who kind of was a kid in the 80s and early 90s who had kind of the green and black original Game Boy, I was totally jealous of the color Game Boy. Caroline.
Yeah.
I know when we talked about doing this episode, you were like,
no, that's not accurate. I was on board, and I was like, I will be a very enthusiastic question asker and listener about it, because I am really interested in the world of gaming, but I would not consider myself, definitely not a console gamer, and we're going to talk about that a bit later on in this episode. But growing up, I remember we didn't have a Nintendo, the original Nintendo, but we could rent it from the place that rented movies, which in my situation in a small town was the back of a convenience store. And so you could get a 3-day rental on this. And so I remember playing Mario 3, the one where he has the tail.
Oh, the best Mario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's yeah, and so you would play for a weekend and get as far as you could, and then, maybe if you were lucky, when your cousins came to visit, your parents would rent it again, and you would play like Super Mario or Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt around that. I played a lot more computer games. We had an Apple IIgs system, and so I played like Carmen Sandiego, a lot of like educational or cooperative games on it. We also had another computer system that had a Three Stooges game on it, where they had to do a bunch of jobs to earn money to save an orphanage.
Okay, so that game was also available on the basic Nintendo.
Oh, was it?
It was, yeah. I totally forgot about that game, but just as soon as you were like, they had to do these odd jobs, and there was like a pie fight they had to do.
Yeah, that involved like throwing pies, and they had to hit people in the face. They had to like run a hospital gurney down a busy hallway. They had to like eat oyster soup and like get like identify where like the crackers were in it. So I mean, we played a lot of that.
Nice. So we played very similar games growing up.
Who knew? Who knew we had this common Three Stooges connection?
That's right.
So now that we've heard about everyone's kind of origin stories when it comes to games, what kind of games do you enjoy playing now? Sam?
So I mostly play a lot of single-player RPGs or role-playing games or adventure games. My favorite in recent years was Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for the Switch, but I also really enjoyed Divinity, Original Sin 2, Outer Worlds. I'm currently playing Horizon Zero Dawn. I enjoyed Redemption 2. I've liked all the Persona games, which are a Japanese RPG, similar to Pokemon. And I also enjoy slower paced games like Stardew Valley, where I can just relax and grow a farm.
It's funny you mentioned Stardew Valley. I remember a couple of EPL staffers I've kind of overheard talking about that game. Can you explain a little bit more about Stardew Valley for those who might not be familiar with it? Because it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So at the start of the game, you're given a abandoned farm that you have to kind of clean up and grow crops. But there's also a lot of like social interaction because the farm is near a town and there's a lot of townspeople. So you can make friends with them. You can get married to one of them. And there's other weirder things. So you can go mining, but there's monsters in the mine, so you have to fight them, and as you get down further levels, there's harder and harder monsters, but you have to be home by dark, otherwise your energy will deplete.
Of course, you're getting tired. Been out all day.
Mm-hmm. There's
Farming
also a wizard in a tower, so it's there's a little bit more to it than it seems.
Yeah, I've seen clips of it online. I know it has a really big following. Somebody was explaining it to me around the office, and I thought it sounded really interesting. And they were asking me, like, "Oh, what game are you currently playing?" And I'm like, "Gears of War 4." So it's like totally different on the other end of the video game spectrum. So yeah, that's. Maybe eventually I will pick up a copy of Stardew Valley and start my farm, because the Wizard in Tower sounds pretty cool.
I've heard a lot of people say about Stardew Valley that that I don't really like those types of games, those types of management sims, and then they just blink and then they've played it for 100 hours.
Mike, how about yourself?
Well, I mean, I'm into a lot of different types of games. I sort of like Sam, I'm more of a single-player person. Multiplayer, it's just not really my thing, unless it's Left 4 Dead, which I used to play. That was awesome. But mostly just, single-player types of games. Some of my favorites, I mean, I'm a big Dark Souls fan, and that Souls-like, from that sort of genre. Really into that. I really like stealth games. That's something I'm into a lot of as well. Like games like Dishonored, Deus Ex. Hitman is a big one for me as well. I love the Hitman series. Just they're basically what those are is you play this Hitman who is you get a contract of somebody that you need to take out, and then basically what the game does is it puts you in this environment. So it's a villa in Italy, and it gives you full access to the place. Like it's a huge area. And there's certain areas where you can just go as yourself, but then if you want to get access to a more secure area, you can try sneaking in, or you can find a guard, lure them into a corner, knock them out, throw them in a dumpster, take their clothes and their stuff, and then you can wear their disguise and you can get around. And it's a ways of sort of getting access to somebody or breaking routines so you can get your target alone and take them out and escape. And It's just fascinating, and it's absolutely hilarious because of the stuff, because everything is a weapon in the game. So of course there's guns and knives and all that stuff because you're a hitman, but you can also pick up a can of tomato sauce and like throw it at someone's head and knock them over.
Yeah, I've tried, and it's funny because there's like a lot of Hitman games actually. It's quite a big series.
It's been out for about 20 years.
Yeah, and there was a forgettable movie a couple of years ago even as well.
Two forgettable.
I didn't realize there was two of them.
That's how forgettable they are.
Yeah, exactly. I've tried those games. I'm terrible at them because I just want to like run in and like kill a person, and then of course I'm found out and I die.
Well, and that's the fun thing, is that it makes the game way harder, but it is feasible. You can do that if you go in guns blazing. I mean, you're going to have a lot of collateral damage because the areas are full of non-playable characters that are innocent. So you can be that monster if you want. But there's fun in that too, right?
Yeah, those are also really entertaining games to watch.
They're hilarious.
Yeah, my husband played them and I just watched, and like I know, like you said, there's unconventional weapons. You can start a mission with like a rubber ducky, or like a clown costume,
or an exploding golf ball. You're absolutely right, because I mean, games like that they're fun to watch when somebody's playing well, but when everything just goes down the toilet and everything falls apart and enemies are looking for you, that's where it gets really funny.
Mm-hmm.
That's what. Sorry, you brought up something really interesting, and not to sidetrack the conversation, but one of the things I've really noticed over the last, seems like 10 years, has kind of been this groundswell of people just like watching other people play video games, to me, which is really fascinating. Growing up, like I hated having to take my turn to play, and I hated watching somebody else play Super Mario Brothers. But you're right, it's interesting now with something, say like Twitch, when people are streaming playing these games like Hitman or maybe Fortnite. It gets actually really entertaining watching some people do really creative stuff in games.
Yeah, for sure. I think part of it is games with narration. So a lot of times you're basically watching a story. So something like Telltale's Walking Dead, it's basically a narrative game. So if someone else is playing it, people who watch still are entertaining. But watching like multiplayer games, it's often about the comedy of the person playing and the entertainment value of what they're doing, and not necessarily the game itself. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Games tend to be more open-ended now as well, because the technology's there that they can do that they can support that type of open-endedness. But there's an example too of the game Skyrim, where there was a guy who used to write about video games. He's a developer now. His name's Tom Francis, and he did this. He used to write for PC Gamer magazine, and he did a whole series on Skyrim where he was playing as a conjurer. So conjurers they create illusions, so they don't actually have any combat skills. But he wanted to try to play that game, the entire game, without having to kill anybody or anything. And so it was all like casting illusions and trying to like distract enemies so he can get past them.
Yeah.
And it was hard, but he was able to do it.
Yeah, that stuff's incredible. And then you also see online too, people are like modding games like Grand Theft Auto and a few other games like that. So it just makes it for some entertaining to watch online.
What types of games do you enjoy, Bryce?
You know what? I'm kind of similar to Sam and Mike. I'm not a big fan of the online multiplayer games, only because I'm getting totally owned by probably like 10-year-olds I'm playing against.
This came up in our kids episode.
Yeah. I love playing the NHL series. I find it really addictive. Every now and then I'll kind of get cocky. I'll be, just destroying the computer, and I'm like confident, and I'm like, you know what? Let's go online and see who we can take on. And of course, I'm down 6-0 in the first period, but that's okay. It's still fun. Like I said, I love the NHL games. Also, too, games that I've talked about already on the show. Some of the open world ones, like Red Dead Redemption 2, is fantastic. The online mode for that is actually pretty fun. And of course, Borderlands as well is really fun too. Caroline?
Yeah.
How about you? Because I think it's kind of is a great way to segue into the next question, but you're into more of the mobile games, right?
Yes, which is why earlier I had to be very clear not to say that I'm not a gamer, because I know that past guest Holly Arneson in particular feels very strongly about this, that, you know, there's no one type of person who plays video games or person who plays online games or mobile games or any of that. And so my games tend to be the match 3 games, like Bejeweled, which in my head I always call Bedazzled, which is not not the same thing. But
don't want to decorate your jeans
yeah,
or denim jacket.
Exactly. Yeah. But the kind of games where you just kind of click or push with your hand to get things lined up in a row, then they disappear and you get points and all of this. I've learned that the visual is more important to me. I almost never have sound on when I'm playing a mobile game. And I have a friend who, when we compare our match 3 games, because a lot of them are based on like time, you only get like usually 5 lives for a certain amount of time, and then you either have to buy more or ask friends for more or just wait for them to refill. And because I usually don't buy more or play with friends, I just wait for them to refill, which means I have to have about 3 match 3 games that I just rotate through while I wait for them to refill. Anyway, so we would be comparing them, and I would say, oh, I'm trying this one. And she would look at it and go, I bet the sound effects are great. Like, I bet every time you clear a row, it sound. And I'm like, I haven't even looked at that. And so I realized that is a whole section of what might appeal to someone that just has no meaning for me. Yeah.
So there's actually been, like, really over the last 10, 15 years, there's been really this explosion in mobile games. Of course, Angry Birds, Candy Crush. My question to everybody is, for a lot of these games, they're all free. Freemium, yes. Has anyone here actually spent money on any of those games, though, to maybe unlock something, or you've got to a level and you can't really pass it?
Nope.
No? Caroline?
Yes, of course. Everyone's like, oh no, of course. I have on these type of games. Definitely, it's usually if I'm sick or something and I'm playing, and then it's like, oh, well, I just need to keep going. And we'll usually buy the lowest tier on there. But yeah, I have. I also have in the past played Kim Kardashian Hollywood.
Oh, I've heard that's really good.
Which was quite addictive.
Yeah.
And I had to stop playing because I got so into it. But it was the job where you had your character and you would get sent out on different jobs. Usually the jobs were making personal appearances at various like clubs or restaurants or things like that. But you would get money for each of these jobs, and then you could spend that money on outfits. So different clothes, accessories, makeup, hair options on there. So that it's not really a farming type game, but it is because like you send her on a job. Similarly, I was quite into The Simpsons Tapped Out.
Oh yeah.
When it first came out, which you would you sent your characters, which were the Simpson characters, on jobs. They would earn money, and then you would buy buildings or decorations to fill up your own little Springfield, and then you could lay it out and design it however you wanted. But I am a completist. So, though that's quite dangerous when you're playing a type of game like that. So I got very into both Kim Kardashian Hollywood and The Simpsons Tapped Out, and then had to just like cold turkey not play anymore and go back to my match 3.
Match 3,
yeah.
Sam, have you played any of these games, or is there certain ones that really hook you?
No, the only mobile game that I've played was Pokemon Go when it first came out.
Oh yeah.
For the summer that it was released, I played it a lot. But then after that, I haven't played it anymore.
I remember because it came out in the US first, then we got it. And I remember that first week I was here at the library, and I went outside at lunch, and it was like all these kind of white collar workers. Everybody was out in Churchill Square with their phones, like looking around and swiping and trying to get their Pokemon. It was crazy. Like for the first, I want to say, first few months of the release, and there was also too, I can't remember which neighborhood it was here in Edmonton, but it was almost kind of like, it wasn't like a flash mob, but there was some rare Pokemon available, and like all these hundreds of people kind of went to this one random neighborhood just to catch a certain character.
At that summer, I was working at Jasper Place branch, and a couple of our staff had turned the branch into a hotspot.
Oh, okay.
And so we had tons of people walking in with their phones, looking for Pokemon.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
Are there any of those games that you like playing, Mike?
No, typically, I'm not super into mobile games. I've played a couple that jumped out though over the years. One is Desert Golfing.
Okay.
And it's like, I think it's about $3 or something on the iOS store. And it's a 2D side-scrolling game where you have the ball and you just use, the swipe to move the ball, and it has to get into the hole, and it's an endless game. It just keeps going forever, but it gets its hooks in you for sure.
For me, there's a couple really stand out, some recent games here. One is Mario Kart Mobile is awesome.
I think you've brought up Mario Kart every time we've talked about video games on the podcast.
I think so, because Mario Kart is amazing.
Yes.
If you haven't played any form of Mario Kart, hit pause on this podcast and go find a Nintendo Switch or something, or old school Nintendo, and definitely play Mario Kart.
So as we mentioned, we weren't able to include games in the March Madness tournament, but if we had a bracket of games, what titles would absolutely have to be included? Mike, let's start with you.
Well, I've got a few. Minecraft would be one I'd put on there for sure, because that's more than just a game. It's a platform, really. Major title. I would definitely include Dark Souls on there, because that's a game that spawned its own genre, and that's a game that people talk about. Oh, it's like Dark Souls, or it's Souls-like, that kind of thing. Another one that I'd probably add on there is called, this is a lesser-known one, and we have it in the collection, although I don't think it's on any of the modern systems. It's called Specops the Line. And it's a third-person military shooter. So the premise is that it takes place in Dubai, where Dubai has been hit by this massive sandstorm that's kind of blocked off the whole city from the rest of the world, and you play these soldiers who go in to find out what happened, because there was a group of Marines that went in and they disappeared. So it's kind of like a Heart of Darkness, Apocalypse Now kind of thing, but it takes place there. It's this third-person shooter, and it's exciting, and it's actually pretty fun and capable that way. But as the story goes on, the game kind of starts messing with you, and it becomes this deconstruction of military shooters and this critique of where you start having to question yourself about, because you're playing a video game and you're just sort of shooting bad guys and all that stuff, but it starts to kind of call you out on that. And even one of the loading screens has this thing where, because sometimes on the loading screens it'll say tutorial stuff, press triangle to pick up ammo or whatever, but then later on it starts saying things like, are you feeling like a hero yet? Something where you kind of go, ugh.
All these passive aggressive comments.
Yeah. And do you even remember why you came here? It's a really interesting game. It didn't really sell very well, and again, I don't think it's been remastered and put on the modern systems, but it's on Steam, so if you play on PC, it's there. Highly recommended game. It's very, very interesting and really well written. So that would be my dark horse one that I'd put on a bracket.
You kind of sold me on the Apocalypse Now vibe with it, so anytime you incorporate that stuff into a game sounds really interesting to me anyway. It kind of reminded me too, just with those comments by the game. I remember when Wii first came out, of course everybody's playing bowling and tennis and everything, and there would always be those reminders, kind of like, hey, did you get outside today? Did you walk around?
Yeah.
Switch does that too.
Turn off the TV a little bit.
Yeah, it's like Netflix with the "Are you still watching?" And it's like, yes, leave me alone, Netflix.
Pretty much.
3DS does that too. You should charge it. Why don't you take a break?
Yeah.
You mentioned Minecraft, and I remember about 10 years ago, the librarians at EPL were at a training session, and Mike came to tell us what Minecraft Minecraft was and really walk us through like what the game was and why kids were playing and what they could do about it. I say kids because at the time that's who we were basically, looking to, who were asking us questions in the library. But yeah, it was something, I mean, we needed to be taught what it was and why, what people were doing in the game.
Mm-hmm. Sam, how about you? What are some of the titles you would have in your bracket?
Definitely Minecraft as well. I think it's been still going strong after a decade. The kids that grew up playing it are now playing it again as teenagers for nostalgia's sake. It's made its way into libraries and schools for educational purposes. So yeah, I definitely would include that. In a similar vein, I think Fortnite should be included just for the way it took everything by storm. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the first of its genre, but it definitely popularized the genre. For similar reasons, I would include Skyrim. Mike mentioned that earlier, so I won't go too much into it. There's just been so many good games over the decade. I think there's been a few really good Legend of Zelda games. So Link Between Worlds for 3DS, it really used the 3DS to its best advantage, and it was just really innovative in the way that Link moved around through the world. I would definitely also include Breath of the Wild. It's a beautiful open world game. It won Game of the year it came out. There's so many creative ways you can approach situations and monsters and robots to either sneak around them, take them out, or it's just so clever and beautiful. It's great. There's so many games.
I almost kind of feel like Legend of Zelda would have been like the Beyonce of the video games bracket, because on the last episode we talked about how for the music category in March Madness we almost had 2 Beyonce albums on there. Mm-hmm. With Legend of Zelda, there's actually probably 2 or 3 games really released in the last 10 years that, if we're coming up with that bracket, could be included in there.
Yeah, for sure. Nintendo's been doing a lot of really good stuff. Like, I would probably even include Super Mario Maker in there, just as a innovative, different kind of game where you're actually making a video game that other people can play. Mm-hmm. I think Portal 2, in a similar vein, a new way of doing co-op play where you have to work together in order to solve puzzles and help each other out.
And that game really kind of pushed things to the next level as far as the quality of the writing and the humor in it, because it's an extremely funny game, and that's a hard thing to do because usually video game humor is really juvenile
or pointed, like the "Are you still playing?"
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I still remember we talked a little bit before we started recording about Donkey Kong Country the other week. You brought it up. And speaking of video game humor, I still remember to this day Cranky Kong, the old man. To me, there was nothing more hilarious than Cranky Kong in those cut scenes, just being grumpy. And Cranky Kong was almost like my spirit animal in that game, I think.
Here's my hot take on Donkey Kong Country.
Okay.
Which is the music of the underwater levels is beautiful and holds up.
Now I have to go home and boot up the old Nintendo 64 and play it again.
Bryce, what would you include?
So there's been a couple games that have already been touched on. Of course, Fortnite, Minecraft. I would include Borderlands 2 in there, possibly over Borderlands 3. I think I enjoyed that one a little bit more. Red Dead Redemption 2. Actually, both Red Dead Redemption games I would put in there as well, because everybody kind of forgets their Rockstar had released Red Dead Revolver around 2004, I believe, and it was kind of a forgettable entry by Rockstar, and they totally kind of reinvented that series, and just you don't see a lot of open world Western games for most systems, so I would definitely put that on there. Grand Theft Auto 5 to me would be ranked very high. It's a game that's been out for, I want to say, close to 10 years now. 7 years, wow. And people are still playing it. The online community for it is it's very popular online. People are modding the game to do some really cool and creative things with it. And if you're looking at Twitch as well, it's also kind of one of the highest streamed channels as well when you see people playing Grand Theft Auto 5. A couple of series as well I want to give a shout out to. One, of course, is the EA Sports NHL games, which try to kind of add these really cool new features every year. This year, I really liked kind of the retro rosters, so you can go back and play as the 80s Oilers if you want, or for me, my St. Louis Blues in the 1990s. That was really fun. And the Madden series as well. It's one of the most top-selling games every single year, and they have like these big tournaments where there's like $1 million prize winners. So yeah, those games would definitely be in my bracket as well.
ESPN's 30 for 30 podcast series has a very interesting episode on the Madden games.
Yes.
And the development of the first one and what the limitations that caused some of the realities of the game and just how it all came together. Very interesting story.
Yeah, it is. It's called Madden's Game. It's on their podcast. And it's funny because as somebody who kind of grew up with those games, I remember playing the first few in the early 90s. And I just kind of thought that, John Madden just kind of lent his name to it and his voice. And that was really it. But the podcast is great because he's actually played quite a big role behind the scenes in developing those games. Caroline,
yeah,
what would you include in the tournament?
I had these in mind before I heard all of your choices, which is basically like what I've been exposed to. So I was going to say Minecraft. I was going to say Fortnite. Red Dead Redemption 2, because everyone talked about their relationship with their horse and how like it was like this deep connection that they had, and probably some kind of Legend of Zelda game, because those people get excited when those come out. And then I would ask if there had been a Mario game.
Yeah, I think you could include maybe Super Mario Galaxy 2 comes to mind. It's probably one of the last great Wii games out there. Also, too, I haven't played it. What's the one for the Switch called? Odyssey.
Super Mario Odyssey.
Yeah, you could probably put that one on there, too.
So that would have been my list. I would have probably tried to make a plug for Candy Crush, except we would probably have tried to only have games in our collection.
Yeah.
So that would have limited any ones I brought forward.
But if we were making a true tournament, you could definitely make the case to include something like Candy Crush or Angry Birds even.
Yes.
So we've kind of all had our picks. Sam, I'm going to start with you. What would you have winning your March Madness bracket if it was on video games?
So I have a personal pick, and then what I actually think would win.
Okay.
So my personal pick is Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, because it's my favorite game of all time. But I know that it's not a game for everyone, and it's not even the best game of the decade. For the actual winner, I would probably go with Minecraft for all the reasons we've talked about. It's legacy, it's innovation, it's playability for people of all ages.
Mike, how about you?
Oh boy, that's a question, isn't it? I'm going to bang on about Dark Souls some more. Yeah, I think it came out in 2011, so it's kind of had the whole decade to really grow and turn into a lot of different things. I think it's just an incredible game. It gets a bit of a bad rap, I think, because I think often when people think of that game, they're talking about the difficulties. It's sort of got this mystique about it as being this really, really hard game. And it is. It's very challenging, but it's not it's not challenging like you said when we grew up playing NES games where you're playing these brutally hard games where enemies just appear out of nowhere and destroy you and you can't do anything about it. Dark Souls isn't hard that way. It's hard in that the enemies, any enemy that you encounter can potentially take you down if you're not careful. So you just have to be really careful and really cautious, and you have to kind of chip away at it. And there's this weird sense of accomplishment that happens. I remember I had a friend who described it as it's kind of like putting a nickel in a jar. Instead of throwing a $100 bill in a jar, you're putting a nickel in there every time. And so it's really slow, and you kind of think you have setbacks and things, but then when you get to that last nickel in there and you get to $100, it feels amazing. And you finally beat a boss in Dark Souls because you just chip away at it, and you die. You try again, try again. And when you finally do it, it's such a great sense of accomplishment, and you feel you just want to go like climb a mountain or something. In that sense, it's a really fun gameplay experience. It's got this really great way of telling a story and with narrative, in that it doesn't have a lot of dialogue. There are some characters and stuff, but a lot of the story is revealed through items you find and places you go where there's little notes and things like that. And so you're getting this lore background, which is really, really deep and really quite detailed and quite powerful. But it's delivered in this way that you have to kind of look for it, and you have to really explore the areas, which is a really clever way of doing that in a video game context, because most of the time video games are just kind of doing what movies do, which is with characters and voice acting and all that stuff, which is fine, but in this case they're really using the format to its full potential.
Caroline, what would you have winning? Would it be Bejeweled?
Yeah, it's Super Mario 3 would be my pick forever.
Yeah.
That's a good choice.
Yeah, I would be more than okay with that.
Yeah. I honestly don't know. This would be like I would need to see the brackets to go like head to head which one was going to get there. But I could see me moving Minecraft really far.
Yeah. I also took Minecraft as well, just because it seemed like absolutely everyone was playing that game, and it just seemed to really attract kids who might not normally play video games as well. And you got to be creative with it, and it's funny because I tried it once. I wasn't a big fan, but just to see just through the library and everywhere else, even in pop culture, Minecraft popped up everywhere, so that would get, to me, that's who I thought should probably win. I would probably vote for, if I was me picking, I would probably go for like Red Dead Redemption 2. There's not too many games that, in my opinion, look as beautiful as it does. There's a mode in it where you're on your horse and you're going to another town. You can kind of put it in like cinematic view, and your screen goes to kind of like a widescreen movie type format, and you just listen to music and kind of watch the background as you kind of ride your horse for like 10-15 minutes to the next town. It's a gorgeous game and fun to play.
So this is why players had such a deep relationship with the horse.
Absolutely.
Because you spend this time with them.
Yeah. Make sure you feed it and brush its hair.
Can I share my Red Dead Redemption 2 story?
Oh,
Because I recently, I hadn't played it, and then I picked it up. My hold came in at the library, so I was like, ooh, cool, I'm going to check this out. So I put it in my PlayStation, and like 3 hours later after it had installed, because it's a massive game, like, cool, this is going to be amazing. So I turned it on and sat down, and, got myself a big bottle of water. I was ready to go. And then, so there's this big cutscene of what's the story. And then I think the game, when you get control, it opens up where you're with your partner up on top of a mountain, and there's like a little farm, and you have to go there and talk to somebody or something, I think, in the snow. So I was like, awesome, this is going to be so much fun. I'm on my horse. And then I started to move, and I guess I just wasn't looking where I was going, and I ended up falling off the mountain on my horse, and we both died. So then I uninstalled it. I was like, I can't do this right now. Looks like I beat the game. So, yeah.
Sorry, your journey is already over. The game doesn't even know what to do. They're like, we didn't really plan for anybody to do it.
The game just kind of
this early.
What was that?
Yeah.
Do you get to name your horse?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you remember what yours was called?
Clyde. Yeah,
Good name.
I don't know why I went with Clyde.
Yeah,
it
that's
just
a good name for
popped
a
in my
horse.
head when I got my horse.
Was it a Clydesdale?
No, it wasn't. That's the thing. I don't know why I thought of it. I think I was thinking maybe of like Clint Eastwood, and he did that movie with the orangutan named Clyde, and
right.
I don't know. I just Clyde just popped out to me.
Sure. So we're coming to the end of today's episode. Bryce, before we get to our roundtable questions, can you let everyone know what we'll be chatting about on our next episode, which will be available on Friday, March 27th?
Yeah, Caroline, we've been really lucky to be able to interview some incredible speakers from EPL's Forward Thinking Speaker Series on the podcast. On the next episode, we'll be chatting with best-selling author of Seven Fallen Feathers and award-winning journalist Tanya Talaga about her upcoming presentation with us called All Our Relations, Finding the Path Forward. This is going to be a great event. I've been reading through Seven Fallen Feathers. It's an incredibly powerful book, and I'm really looking forward to chatting with her.
Yeah, I heard her speak at LitFest a couple years ago, and it was just incredible, so I can't wait to hear her when she comes to EPL.
Yeah. So let's get to our quick roundtable questions before we wrap up here today. So Sam, let's say you could only play one game for the rest of your life. Which one would it be and why?
So I'm going to sound like a broken record, but Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild. I feel like there's no end to the creative ways you can interact with the environment. I've seen some videos of really cool ways that players have lured enemies into each other so that they fight each other, or you can take your bow and you can knock off a beehive so that the bees will start attacking the monsters. There's just so many cool creative things. There's tons of exploration you can do. If you want to get to the top of a mountain, you have to actually climb your way up, but once you do and you see the view of the world, it's totally worth it. So I think I could spend the rest of my gaming life in there.
Nice. Mike, how about yourself?
I have a couple of choices. One, actually, like you, I'm a big fan of the NHL series. And that's a good one for playing forever just because it's hockey.
Yeah.
You can ramp up the difficulty and, it's never the same game twice.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be a choice. Another one would be Civilization, like Civ 5 or 6. I'm not sure. Probably 5. That was my favorite one. Because you're playing, you can play whatever country you want. There's lots of options there. You can play as, by destroying all your enemies. You can play diplomatically. You can, there's so many different ways you can approach that game. And it's fresh every time.
Caroline, how about you? Which game?
Tetris.
Oh, yeah.
On Game Boy.
Like the original black and green version?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that was fun. Did you ever play it? Did you ever play 2 players?
Oh, when my cousins came to visit, because
yeah.
they had another Game Boy.
Yeah.
And so only a couple times, but if it's the only game I'm playing for the rest of my life, I can get really creative about it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That is an addictive game. That would probably be in my top 5 games of all time, I think. For me, just like Mike, I would take probably the recent NHL game. Gameplay just never ends. You could play as different teams, so I'd probably try and win the cup with everybody.
Is that the retro one?
Yeah, so you can play as retro teams and on it as well. You can make yourself as a player. So many different game modes. I would just never get sick of playing it.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Mike and Sam. Before we go, do you have anything that you want our listeners to know about?
So we updated the EPL mobile app for iOS back in January, and people to stay tuned for more news about the updated app for Android later this year.
Yeah, we've been getting lots of questions about people saying I don't have an iPhone. When am I going to be able to get this on my Android? So it is coming though.
Yeah, it is coming. I'm also excited because I have an Android and I haven't been able to use the updated app yet. So.
One of the features that people really love is how easy it is to get to your barcode on the app. If you've left your library card at home, you don't want to lose it, you can carry it on the app and use that at the checkout machines to get your material.
Mike, anything happening at Clairview?
Well, aside from the fact that Clairview rules, shout out to Team Purple. We have a really fun branch there, and so please come visit us. We're not that far away, and so we've got a lot of things going on. I mean, as I mentioned before, CBC has been at the rec center all week. They'll be long gone by the time this airs. The spring break is coming up, so we've got a bunch of cool classes coming up for spring break at our branch. We've got one called Nutty Nature, which I can't believe they didn't call it Nutty by Nature, but whatever. There's another one called Upgrade, Upscale, Recycle, Bubblelicious, which is going to be a really fun one. We're making different sized bubbles and different shapes of bubbles. Then we have Phileas Flash coming to visit. There's going to be a circus performer who's going to teach people how to do circus tricks. We're doing a French language one about science that we're getting a staff member to come in and deliver that one for us. So if you speak French or you want to hear a class in French, come check it out. All this stuff is on the website, of course, under Clairview Branch.
Nice. Yeah, we'll have a link to that in today's show notes. And of course, we have to mention, because it's going on right now, don't forget to vote every day in our Overdue Finds March Madness tournament. Caroline, there's been some really interesting results so far. And make sure you go online and vote for your favorites on our Twitter and Facebook pages. And don't forget to use the hashtag EPL March Madness and share your bracket. We still want to see what you ended up picking to win.
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite times of the year.
It is.
It's just great to see these items go head to head.
Mm-hmm.
So we hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you haven't, we encourage you to subscribe so that you automatically get our new episodes. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We love getting reviews. And also tell a friend about the show.
Yeah, and don't forget that we'll have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes. We, of course, would also love to hear from our listeners. So if you have any favorite video game memories you want to share with us, or maybe some game room recommendations, hit us up on Facebook or on Twitter at epl.ca, or email us at podcast@epl.ca. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.